Out of nowhere, my fiancée looks at me and says to stop telling people she's my future wife because it makes it look like she settled for less. All I could say back to that was, good to know. That very night, I went to work quietly scratching my name off every single guest list she'd put me on. Fast forward 2 days later, she walks into a brunch spot to meet up with her friends, catches one glimpse of what's sitting right there at her seat, and completely forgets how to breathe. My name is Owen, I'm 33 years old, and just 3 days ago, the woman I was supposed to marry told me straight to my face that being with me made her look like she was taking a demotion in life. By the time she finally sat down at that table with her friends and saw the envelope I had specifically arranged to be dropped off for her, reality hit her like a ton of bricks, and she realized I was completely done being anybody's consolation prize. I'd been together with Andrea for nearly 3 years, and we'd been engaged for about 5 months. We first crossed paths at a work conference back when I was 30 and she was 31. She was making a living in corporate law while I worked over on the finance side of things. Right from the start, we hit it off big time since we shared the exact same sense of humor, came from similar backgrounds, and both wanted the whole marriage and kids deal down the road. The relationship just moved along naturally from there. We ended up moving into the same place after a year of dating, got engaged this past spring, and officially set our wedding date for next October. But then, right around 2 months ago, I noticed a real shift in how she treated me. Andrea started dropping these little comments about my job, the people I hung out with, and what she called my potential. It wasn't anything downright nasty, just these constant little passive-aggressive digs that started piling up over time. She'd say things like, "You're pretty comfortable exactly where you are, aren't you?" Or, "Don't you ever want to aim a little higher?" And then she'd point out that all her friends' partners were already directors or VPs by now. Now, I make good money, it's a solid 6-figure income, even if it isn't executive level. I genuinely love the work-life balance I have going for myself. I honestly thought Andrea was on the same page, but apparently, I was dead wrong about that. Then, 3 weeks ago, we went out to her friend Vanessa's engagement party, which was a massive event packed with people from Andrea's social circle. The second we walked through the door, I started introducing the two of us to some folks Andrea was hoping to network with, saying, "Hi, I'm Owen, and this is my fiancée, Andrea." Later that night, while I was driving us home, she brings it up out of nowhere, asking me if I could please not do that anymore. I asked her what she meant, and she said, "Introduce me as your fiancé. It's just weird." I looked at her and said, "How is it weird? We are literally engaged." She told me she knew that, but said I didn't need to go around announcing it like that because it made her feel like I was trying to claim ownership over her or something. I just let it slide at the time, thinking she was probably just exhausted since it had been a really long, draining party. But then, just 2 nights ago, we were sitting at a dinner with a bunch of her colleagues and old law school buddies she'd known for years. Somebody at the table asked how the two of us met, and I answered by saying, "Andrea is my future wife, and we're getting hitched next October." The whole table went dead silent for a second before everyone picked back up with the conversation. But I could see Andrea's face instantly go completely tight. The minute we got into the car for the drive home, she absolutely blew up at me. She yelled that she had already asked me not to introduce her that way, so I asked what the big deal was about calling her my future wife when that's exactly who she is. She looked right at me and said it made her look like she settled, like she couldn't do any better in life, so she just settled for me. Hearing that felt like taking a massive punch straight to the gut, and when I asked if she really thought marrying me was settling, she tried to backpedal and say that wasn't what she meant. I told her that was exactly what she meant, pointing out she just said those exact words, and asked how else I was supposed to take it, but she just claimed I was twisting everything around. Then she said she was just trying to say I didn't need to be so incredibly public about the whole thing, pointing out that all her friends are out there marrying doctors, executives, and big-time entrepreneurs. She looked at me and said, "And you're fine, you're good at what you do, but you just don't have that kind of ambition." She told me that whenever I announce her as my fiancé, it just puts a giant spotlight on that fact. I told her it sounds like it spotlights the fact that she thinks she's marrying someone beneath her, but she insisted she never used the word beneath. I told her telling me I make her look like she settled amounts to the exact same thing, and at that point she just went completely quiet. She didn't offer a single apology, and she didn't take back a word of it. She just claimed she was tired and walked off to bed. I ended up sitting out there in the living room for probably 2 straight hours just processing everything, and that's when I came to a few big decisions. First, I pulled up the calendar for every single upcoming event Andrea had RSVP'd the two of us for over the next few months. There was a wedding shower for her friend, a fancy law firm gala, a birthday bash for her old college roommate, and a whole bunch of brunches and dinners. She had just gone ahead and added me as her +1 to every single one of them without even asking, completely assuming I'd just tag along like some kind of accessory or a partner she was secretly too embarrassed to claim in front of her peers. So, I went through every single event on that list and completely removed myself from the guest counts. I fired off a round of polite emails to the hosts letting them know I wouldn't be able to make it after all, and apologized for the short notice. A few of these hosts were actually pretty close friends of Andrea's who already had my email address from past hangouts. I made sure to keep those messages short, sweet, and totally professional. Once that was done, I took it a step further and reached out directly to Andrea's best friend, Melissa. Melissa and I had always gotten along great, so I asked her if she'd be down to help me pull something off at the big group brunch Andrea had lined up with her inner circle for the weekend. Melissa was a bit hesitant at first, but the very second I laid out exactly what Andrea had said to me, she hopped on board without a single doubt. By the time Friday morning rolled around, Andrea acted like absolutely nothing was wrong, getting ready for work and chatting away about wedding plans before asking if I'd confirmed our spot for her friend Sarah's wedding shower that weekend. I looked at her and said, "About that, I actually canceled my RSVP." She stopped and said, "What? Why would you do that?" I told her flat out it was because she was clearly embarrassed to introduce me as her fiancé, so I figured she'd much rather just show up to these things solo. I told her this way she could completely avoid the whole looking like she settled situation, but she just told me to stop being ridiculous. I told her I wasn't being ridiculous at all. I explained that I was simply respecting her wishes since she clearly didn't want people knowing she was tying the knot with me because it made her look bad. So going to her events alone solved the whole problem. She told me I was being childish, but I told her I was just being crystal clear. I reminded her that she said what she said. I heard her loud and clear, and now I was just taking action based on it. She just stood there staring at me, asking if I was seriously skipping Sarah's shower. I told her I was skipping that and every other event she'd signed us up for, letting her know I went through the entire list the night before and scratched my name off everything. She started to protest, telling me I couldn't just do that, but I told her I absolutely could and already did, because if she's that embarrassed to be engaged to me, she shouldn't be bringing me along anyway. It's as simple as that. Right after that, I took off for work, and she spent the rest of the day blowing up my phone with text messages. It started out with her being completely angry, then she flipped to being totally defensive, and finally she started trying to backtrack on everything she'd said. She kept texting things like, "I didn't mean it the way it sounded," and "You're completely overreacting," followed by, "Can we please just sit down and talk about this?" I only sent back a single reply the entire day. I told her, "I heard exactly what you meant. Have a great time at brunch on Sunday." Now, for the first update on Saturday, Andrea decided to try a completely different tactic and came at me all apologetic. She claimed she'd just been incredibly stressed out about her job and never intended to hurt my feelings. She went on and on about how she was obviously proud to be marrying me, and insisted that I was just totally misunderstanding what she was actually concerned about. So, I looked at her and asked point blank, "So you're saying you aren't embarrassed to introduce me to people as your future husband?" She swore up and down, "No, of course not." So then I asked her, "Then why on earth did you say it makes you look like you settled?" She had absolutely no answer for that one, and just kept repeating that I was taking the whole thing completely out of context and that she had just phrased it badly. I told her the context was actually crystal clear, and that the truth was she just didn't think I was impressive enough for her little social circle. I told her she honestly believed that being engaged to a guy like me reflected poorly on her, and that it wasn't a matter of bad phrasing at all, it was how she truly felt deep down. She just pleaded, "Owen, please," and then asked if I was going to change my mind about the brunch the next day, saying she really wanted me to come along. She begged me to just show up with her so we could put the whole thing behind us, but I told her flat out I wasn't going and that she was going to have to be the one to explain my absence to her friends. "What do you think about this?" What would you do in this situation if your partner put you in a spot like that? Leave a comment with your thoughts because I'd love to know. Anyway, she asked me what she was supposed to tell them, and I told her to just tell them the absolute truth. That she's embarrassed to be engaged to someone who makes her look like she settled for less. Man, she did not like that answer at all. We spent the rest of Saturday basically avoiding each other in separate rooms, and later that evening, she asked me one last time if I'd reconsider going to the brunch, but I just gave her another firm no. She went off to bed completely frustrated. But what Andrea had absolutely no clue about was that I had already coordinated a whole plan with Melissa. The brunch was happening at this really upscale restaurant, one of those trendy spots with bottomless mimosas that Andrea's friend group absolutely loved going to. Melissa had pulled some strings with the restaurant staff to have something specific dropped off right at Andrea's seat before the rest of the group even showed up, which was an envelope with Andrea's name written on the front. Tucked inside that envelope was a personal letter I had written to her, along with an official copy of the cancellation confirmation for our wedding venue. When Sunday morning rolled around, Andrea got herself all ready for the brunch and asked me one final time if I was coming with her. I told her no again, and she finally left the apartment around 10:30 a.m. while I just stayed behind and waited. Right around 11:15 a.m., my phone started lighting up. It was Andrea calling, but I just let it ring, and she tried calling 3 more times after that. Then, I got a text from Melissa saying, she opened it. You seriously should have seen the look on her face. About 15 minutes later, Andrea came flying back home, bursting right through the front door with the envelope clenched tightly in her hand. She demanded to know, "What the hell is this?" And I looked at her and said it was exactly what it looked like. The cancellation confirmation for our wedding venue. She screamed, "You canceled our venue without even talking to me?" And I reminded her that since she told me marrying me made her look like she settled, I just decided to solve that little problem for her, so there'd be no wedding and no settling. She started crying, saying, "Owen, you can't just go and cancel our wedding." So I corrected her and said I technically only canceled the venue, but yeah, I was canceling the whole wedding too because as of that exact moment, we were no longer engaged. She just stood there staring at me in total shock, asking if I was seriously breaking up with her over one single comment. I told her it wasn't just about one single comment, but rather a whole pattern of behavior. I told her it was about months of her making me feel like I was never enough for her, acting like she was completely embarrassed by me, and making it seem like she was only with me because she couldn't lock down someone better. I told her I was completely done being anybody's backup plan in life. She insisted, "You're not my backup plan." So I pressed her on why she said introducing me as her future wife made her look like she settled, why she was constantly comparing me to her friends' partners, and why she cared so damn much about how I made her look to other people. But she couldn't give me a single answer. She just stood there frozen, holding my letter and that cancellation notice, so I told her that the letter explained everything perfectly. How she'd been making me feel for months, how exhausted I was of being treated like a disappointing option, and how I deserved to be with someone who was genuinely proud to hold my hand, not someone who was ashamed of me. She just begged, "Owen, please, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize." I told her the only reason she didn't realize it was because she wasn't thinking about me at all. I told her she was solely focused on her own image, what her friends were going to think, and whether or not I was impressive enough to show off to her social circle, and I let her know that isn't love, that's just social climbing. She started crying that I was being unfair, but I told her that what's truly unfair is spending 3 whole years with a guy, agreeing to marry him, and then telling him to his face that he makes her look bad to her friends. That is what's actually unfair. Andrea didn't just pack up and leave right away. She actually spent the rest of that Sunday trying to convince me that I was completely overreacting and throwing away 3 whole years of a relationship over a simple misunderstanding. She kept insisting that if I would just give her a single chance to prove she didn't really feel that way about me, we could easily work through the whole thing. I looked at her and asked exactly how she planned on proving it, asking if she was going to start introducing me to her friends now. I pointed out that she'd already had plenty of opportunities to do just that, and she had made it abundantly clear she wanted no part of it. She told me she'd do it right now, saying she would call up every single person from that brunch and tell them I was her fiancé. But I told her not to even bother because Melissa had already filled them in. I let her know that after she rushed out of the restaurant in a total panic, Melissa sat down and explained the whole situation to the group, telling them exactly what Andrea had said to me about settling and being embarrassed. I told her that her friends now knew the exact reason why I was walking away, and the second I said that, her face went completely white. She was horrified, asking if Melissa really told them, and I admitted that I was the one who asked her to do it. I told Andrea that since she wanted to keep me hidden away like some kind of dirty secret, I wanted to make sure her friends knew the actual truth about why the wedding was officially off. She accused me of humiliating her in front of her entire social circle, but I fired right back, telling her that she had been humiliating me for months by calling me unambitious, saying I made her look bad, and constantly comparing me to everyone else's partners. I told her I just made sure her friends knew the real story behind our breakup. She spent another full hour trying to change my mind, crying her eyes out, apologizing, and saying she would do absolutely anything to fix this, but I was completely checked out. I finally told her to go ahead and pack a bag so she could stay somewhere else for a few days while we figured out the logistics of our living situation. She finally left the apartment around 6 p.m. and went over to stay with her sister. By Monday morning, I was already getting in touch with a lawyer to figure out how to untangle our finances, since we had combined a few accounts and both signed the lease on our place. I knew it was going to be a messy process, but it was something that absolutely had to be done. Later that afternoon, Andrea's mother called me up out of the blue, saying, "Owen, honey, what on earth is going on?" Andrea called us crying hysterically, saying you ended the engagement. I told her that I did, and asked if Andrea had bothers to tell her why. She told me Andrea claimed I just overreacted to a comment she made and that I was being completely unreasonable. So, I laid it all out for her, explaining that Andrea told me being engaged to me made her look like she settled, and that introducing me as her future husband embarrassed her because I wasn't impressive enough for her friends. I made sure to emphasize that those were her exact words, not just my interpretation. There was nothing but dead silence on the line for a moment, and then she asked if Andrea really said that to me. I told her she'd said it multiple times in all sorts of different ways, for months on end. Her mom just sighed and said, "Oh, Owen, I am so incredibly sorry. That is just not okay, and it's definitely not how you treat someone you love." I told her that was exactly my thinking, too. She then asked if there was even a small chance the two of us could find a way to work through this, but I told her no, explaining that I had spent months feeling like I was never enough, like I was just some big disappointment she was stuck with, and I refused to ever go back to that. She told me she completely understood, said she was so sorry it had to end this way, and thanked me for always being so good to their family. We talked for just a couple more minutes after that. She mentioned that she was going to have a serious talk with Andrea to try and make her realize the gravity of what she'd done, and while I appreciated the gesture, I didn't expect it to change reality. Now, for the third update. It's been about 3 weeks since that infamous brunch, and Andrea and I are right in the middle of splitting everything up. She managed to find herself a new apartment and is scheduled to move in next month. I'm actually staying put in our current place since the lease is mostly in my name anyway, and I can easily cover the rent on my own. She's tried to get back together with me multiple times, sending these massive text messages about how she finally realizes how wrong she was, how much she took me for granted, and claiming she's been going to therapy to work through her deep-seated issues with image and external validation. Every time, I've just sent back a polite but incredibly firm response, letting her know it is completely over, there is absolutely no going back, and asking her to please just respect my final decision. Her friend group has actually been pretty split over the whole thing. Some of them think I totally overreacted and should have given her another shot, but the rest of them, including Melissa, have completely backed me up. Melissa actually told me that after she laid everything out at the restaurant, several of Andrea's friends confessed they'd noticed her being really dismissive toward me in the past, and that she'd made slick comments before about me not being on her level. Hearing that made me realize the whole thing wasn't just some crazy idea in my own head. As for the wedding venue, they ended up refunding us about 60% of our deposit, so even though we lost a good chunk of cash, it was honestly worth every single penny to avoid legally binding myself to someone who viewed me as a disappointing consolation prize. Just last week, Andrea sent me a long, handwritten letter going on about how she knows she completely blew it, how sorry she is for making me feel inadequate, and how badly she wishes she could take those words back. The letter wrapped up with her saying, "I wasn't actually embarrassed of you. I was just incredibly insecure about myself. I thought if you were more impressive on paper, it would make me feel better about my own choices in life, and I projected all my issues onto you. I read through it twice before just tossing it into a drawer. Maybe she's actually telling the truth, and maybe she really is doing the heavy lifting to fix herself, but none of that changes what she said to me, and it certainly doesn't erase months of making me feel like I was a letdown. Here is the final update on everything. It has now been 4 full months since I officially called off the engagement, and Andrea completely moved all her stuff out about 6 weeks ago. We've barely had any contact at all since then, keeping things strictly business regarding splitting up our shared items and shutting down our joint accounts. Everything is officially finalized now. We are completely out of each other's lives. I actually found out through Melissa that Andrea has been having a really rough time lately, having lost a few friends who either chose my side or just got completely fed up with all the drama. On top of that, her family is deeply disappointed in how she handled the relationship, though she is apparently still stuck with therapy, trying to unpack whatever made her so obsessed with status and appearances. I actually bumped into her just once, about 3 weeks ago, at a little coffee shop right down the street from our old apartment. She was sitting with someone. I couldn't tell if it was a date or just a friend. The second she caught sight of me, her face turned totally pale. So I just gave her a polite nod and kept right on walking without stopping to chat or engaging with her at all. I just acknowledged she was there and kept moving forward, but she ended up texting me later that afternoon. Her message just said, "It was really good to see you today. You look truly happy and I'm glad." I didn't even bother to type out a response to that. Honestly, my life has gotten significantly better ever since the day we split up, and I've reconnected with a bunch of great friends I had totally neglected while I was caught up in that relationship. I even picked up rock climbing, which is something I'd been wanting to try out for years, and I've been doing some casual dating. It's nothing serious quite yet, but I am in absolutely no rush here, because I'm finally taking the time to learn what I actually want out of a partner instead of constantly molding myself into what somebody else wants me to be. The absolute biggest shift has been on the inside, because I don't constantly second-guess myself anymore, and I don't sit around wondering if I'm ambitious enough, successful enough, or impressive enough for the room. I am completely comfortable with exactly who I am and everything I've achieved in life, and if that isn't enough for someone, then they simply aren't the right fit for me. My brother actually asked me just last week if I ever think about reaching out to Andrea to see how she's holding up or to get some closure. I told him flat out no, because we got all the closure we ever needed at that Sunday brunch when she sat down and opened an envelope that spelled out exactly why I was done with her. That was the only closure either one of us required. Melissa and I still touch base every now and then, and she told me Andrea actually asked about me recently, wanting to know if I was seeing anybody new. Melissa apparently shut that down immediately, telling Andrea that it wasn't any of her business anymore, reminding her that she had a good man and made him feel worthless, so she needed to just let him move on. I really appreciated her having my back like that. The one major takeaway I keep coming back to is that Andrea didn't just make a single, isolated comment about settling. She accidentally exposed a deeply rooted mindset that had been there from the very beginning. All those little digs about my career path, my drive, and my potential were all connected to the exact same issue. She had built up this perfect, grand image in her head of what her life was supposed to look like, and I just didn't fit into that mold. Instead of realizing that her unrealistic expectations were the real problem, she chose to try and change who I was or keep me hidden away. I am just incredibly grateful I figured all of this out before we actually walked down the aisle, before we brought kids into the mix, and before I wasted years of my life trying to measure up to a set of shifting, arbitrary standards. Some people have told me they thought I was way too harsh, and that canceling the venue and delivering that letter at brunch was just unnecessary drama. But I completely disagree with that take, because Andrea desperately needed to realize that actions have real-world consequences, and you can't just treat your partner like a disappointing accessory and expect them to stick around forever. Leaving that letter at the brunch table ensured that both she and her inner circle understood exactly why I was walking away from the relationship. If I could go back in time, would I do things any differently? Maybe I would have sat down for a longer conversation before pulling the trigger on the venue, or maybe I would have given her one more shot to offer a meaningful apology. But honestly, probably not, because she had months to apologize for those comments, to realize she was actively hurting me, and to actually change the way she treated me. She chose not to do a thing until I finally took action. I'm Owen, I'm 33, I'm single, and I'm living in an apartment that belongs entirely to me. I've learned that being completely alone is infinitely better than being stuck with someone who constantly makes you feel small. Andrea thought I wasn't nearly impressive enough for her friends, but as it turns out, she wasn't nearly impressive enough to be a quality partner. And that is all there is to it. As a quick side note, people keep asking me exactly what that letter said. I kept the whole thing incredibly simple, explaining exactly how her comments had chipped away at me over the past few months, listing out the specific things she'd said, including the comment about settling, and stating clearly that I was ending the engagement because I deserve a partner who is genuinely proud to be with me. I attached the venue cancellation paperwork right to it as absolute proof that I was serious. For the second side note, yes, I absolutely did lose a good chunk of money by canceling the venue and tearing up the other wedding arrangements, but it was worth every single penny. I would have lost a hell of a lot more down the road divorcing someone who fundamentally didn't respect who I was. And finally, a few of Andrea's friends from that brunch have actually reached out to me a couple of times. Some of them apologized for not noticing how poorly she was treating me, while others asked if I was truly done for good or if there was a chance we might reconcile. I've been crystal clear with every single one of them, letting them know it is totally over, there will be no reconciliation, and there are no second chances because she showed me exactly who she was and I finally chose to believe her.